listen to God's word for you this morning. If a brother or sister sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If he or she listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If your brother or sister refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile or tax collector. For truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? But Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you, 7 times 70 times. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth
and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer.
So I want to start actually by sharing a very personal story with you. As many of you know, I'm not just a pastor, but a pianist and organist. And this is actually the first job I've had as an adult where being a pianist organist isn't part of the job. Which, you know, is a gift because I'm not running back and forth, but at times it's a little sad for me too. So I'm grateful for Dale when he gives me opportunities to play. But I didn't actually start playing organ until I was 22 and was a volunteer in mission in New Mexico, and the local organist at the Presbyterian Church across the street heard me playing piano one day, and she said, I want to teach you to play organ. And in exchange, I want when your volunteer mission year is done, I want to hire you to come and accompany my classes out of the community college, which I did for another year. And I want you to be my assistant director of the church, which was great. I mean, all this, okay, sure, that sounds good, I'll do that. So, but I'd only been playing organ for about a month when the choir director called me one Sunday morning and said, I am sicker than a dog, you're on. So, okay. So 22 years old, I walked down to the church and I played for the first time for the worship service. And afterwards, people were appreciative and very kind. And then 3 days later, a letter came in the mail. Now, the first thing I noticed about this letter was that it was not actually written to me. It was written to the session, to the pastor, and to the choir director. And the letter said, Dear session, pastor, and choir director, I have never been so appalled by anything as what I heard on Sunday. Barbara Barkley's organ playing was a disaster, and I want to prevent it ever happening again. She concluded with, however, in the future, if you need a substitute organist, I'd be happy to play. Love, Edna. Well, I'm sure you can imagine, I'm 22 years old. Already had a bit of fragile self-esteem at that point in time, and frankly, I was devastated. I mean, there's just no other word. I was devastated. And at first I thought, this has got to be a joke. It's got to be a joke. I mean, why would, somebody wouldn't really write this nasty kind of letter. It's got to be a joke. Well, that was soon dispelled by a call from the pastor, followed by a call from the choir director, who were both very sympathetic. The choir director said, I've got nothing but positive comments, and Edna hates it when somebody else is asked to play, so you need to just let this go. The pastor, on the other hand, said, you've made it, because you haven't made it in our church until you got a nasty letter from Edna. So you should feel like you're included now. You're really part of the she did was very hurtful. Should she have talked to me? Of course, she should have talked to me, but she should have done it in person. She should have not used such language. She could have said, I would prefer to play, I don't think you're ready, but using attacking words, using mean words, it's unkind, it's cruel. But it's actually not about Edna's faults that I want to talk about today. It's about mine, the sessions, and the pastor and the choir director's faults. Because we responded to Edna's letter by ignoring it. I ignored it because I was scared to death to talk to her. If somebody could be this mean on paper, how on earth would she talk to me in person? The choir director ignored it because, well, she's old and set in her ways. There's nothing we can do about her. The session ignored it because they received constant letters from Edna, and they just kind of tossed them in the round bin on a regular basis. And the pastor ignored it using the words of forgiveness. We should just forgive her by letting it go. And that sounds good, except it's not. By failing to talk to her, the results were several. One, I didn't get a chance to heal it and carried it around for 8 years before I could even tell somebody else about it. You guys are the privileged few who get to hear something like this. It was unkind to Edna because it said to her we didn't care enough about her to engage her. That we didn't care enough about her to help her grow or to listen or to engage her in any kind of way. And frankly, it was unkind to all the future people to whom she would write these nasty letters because being that she was never confronted, this pattern continued. We erred that day by choosing not to speak our truth. Jesus is pretty clear in the book of Matthew about what we are supposed to do. We have lots of ways to justify not speaking our mind, but none of them does Jesus say, oh, well, okay, you don't have to talk to that person if you forgive them. And Jesus doesn't say, well, you don't have to talk to that person if you think there's no chance they'll change. And Jesus doesn't say, well, you don't have to talk to that person if you think that, that there's just no possibility of moving forward or if you're scared. No. Jesus was really clear. And it's interesting, many of our Bibles translate the phrase, if a member of your church sins against you. But actually, the Greek is if brother or sister. Your church is supposed to be your family. And like family, we are called to communicate with one another. Does that mean it's easy? Is it easy to communicate with your family? Okay, not always, right? It's hard to confront. I know that. But when we fail to talk to each other, when we fail to be direct, we really are communicating that the relationship is not worth our honesty. There's another problem with it, and that is that most of the time when we fail to be direct with people, we still talk about it. We just don't talk about it directly. And I will own this from that experience. I talked about it. I talked about Edna's letter to anybody who had already gotten a copy, who'd already heard it. I talked to the choir director. I talked to the pastor. And what my talking to them succeeded in doing was raising their anger at Edna, raising their pain at anger, getting them more and more upset at this person and still not talking to her. Did she maybe hear through the grapevine that we were upset? Probably. But I'll tell you, there's some really serious problems with hearing things third hand. And I have it written here somewhere. I never go off script. I don't know where I am. First of all, when we hear critique third hand, we don't really have a context for it. We don't know where it's coming from, because the reality is, every time I am upset with you, there's a part of me in that equation. And if you don't know who it is that's upset. You're not going to have a context for that upset. You're not going to have a relationship that you're actually working through. So that's the first problem. There's no way to work through the relationship if it's anonymous, if the critiques that are coming are anonymous. And it's always about relationship. But second of all, when you hear things out of context, it's easy to globalize and to also not learn or grow from it. When I hear critiques, and you know, this is pretty typical, I'll hear, people don't like your sermons. Okay, well, how am I going to fix that? What kind of specific comment is that? If you tell me I talk too fast, that's something I can work on. I know I talk too fast. If you tell me that I drop off the ends of my sentences, that's also something I can work on. I know I do that too. But if you just tell me I don't like your sermons, there's nothing I can do about that, right? And when things go through the grapevine, that's how they come back, global. They come back as these global statements that we can't address, we can't fix. The bigger issue for me, though, is that when you hear things anonymously, it's really easy to think that instead of one person having a complaint, that somehow it's everybody. It's really easy to start globalizing. And so what started as one comment starts making the church feel unsafe. Makes your community start feeling unsafe. James Angel wrote this in his book, Yes as a World. He wrote, "Church ought to be a set of moments where we feel most expansively, openly, and honestly ourselves. Yet it is in the church where we often find it hardest to be ourselves, where we are often the most guarded, the most paranoid, the most unsure of being accepted and understood. The church is a place where every Sunday we confess that we've got stuff we need to work on. Every Sunday we do this. And yet somehow it is hard for us to talk honestly and openly with one another. In our legal system, we're required to be direct. You're not allowed to be an anonymous accuser, right? How much more should that be the case with people who are supposed to be family? With people who are supposed to be your brother and sister? Does it mean that when we talk directly to somebody that we'll always get what we want accomplished? No. And Jesus talked about that too. Sometimes you come to somebody and you say, you know, I feel hurt about X because of Y. I feel hurt about that. And they'll say, well, too bad for you. So then Jesus has a second step, and that is bring somebody with you and try to have the conversation again. But Jesus is really clear about what that other person's role is also. It doesn't say bring somebody else so that the two of you can gang up on the other person, right? It says bring somebody else as a witness. A witness. A witness. That means somebody who just helps you both hear each other. Somebody who helps you communicate with each other. And then he ends it with this, bring it to the church, and then if they still don't listen, treat them as a Gentile and a tax collector. Well, how did Jesus treat Gentiles and tax collectors? He still treated them with love. He still treated them with forgiveness. He still included them when others didn't. In other words, we are called to be in relationship with each other, and it's not easy. It's not easy. And again, part of that is not just that we're called to communicate, but called to communicate with love, which means we don't use attacking words. We don't use mean words. We talk about ourselves and how we are feeling and how we are impacted by another person's actions. And that's not easy. We're not taught how to talk to each other in school. We're not taught most of the time how to talk to one another in helpful and healthy ways. But we can learn, and as a church we're called to do that. The thing is, Jesus asks a lot of us, but I deeply believe that everything Jesus calls us to do is for our best and highest good. We are called to learn to talk to each other because Jesus wants us to be whole. We are called to learn to talk to each other because Jesus cares about our relationships with one another and wants them to be healed and reconciled. To go back to my original story was Edna and Salt, of course. Do I carry that letter in my head? Of course. But part of why I carry that letter in my head is because I didn't deal with it with her. That is my mistake. And I hope it's one that we can all be invited to learn from. Jesus celebrates with us the opportunity to cross boundaries, to cross barriers of misunderstanding and miscommunication and hurt through communication. And that is something we truly can celebrate. We can celebrate. The relationships, while not easy, are full of gifts. Gifts of growth and love and expansion. Thanks be to God.